I would start from the beginning, asking you how does everything started with Flos, and how did you get in touch and start to work together?
Yes. Well, I was really lucky to be considered to be a Flos candidate. The art directors, Paolo and Fabio, sent me an email. I think it was 4 years ago. It was quite a long
Oh,
time. Yeah, it
okay.
was at the beginning of the pandemic, I believe.
Yeah, so before COVID. Okay.
Yes, so
Wow.
it's definitely been something that we've been working on for a while, and I got an email from Paolo and Fabio they're the art directors of Floss, and they also have a practice called Calvi Brambilla,
Mhm.
and they sent me an email, and I thought it was spam at first. Floss, I just didn't expect them to give me a call, and I was very excited and impressed, and we started the ball rolling with ideas of possible collaboration, and that's how it started.
Wow, cool. And so, would you describe the lamp you have designed?
It's a small table lamp. It uses a very simple magnetic joint. So this is literally something that I've had here at the studio for a really long time.
Okay.
You can take it apart, put it back
Well,
together.
this is the first reference you used for the lamp.
Correct, and that was I think it was around 4 years ago, maybe a bit later, but
Mhm.
yes. So this is definitely was the starting point for it, and I was very much looking for. There's something fantastic that I love about Floss products, especially the ones that were designed by Achille Castiglione, because they have a sort of involvement with the user, so that you feel that you're adjusting your light where you need it. I have two parentesi
Mhm.
at home, which are
Wow.
constantly being changed, as in where I want to light the light. Sometimes I want to bounce the light off of a white ceiling so that it diffuses a certain way, and sometimes I want to highlight certain things. And I think light is really dynamic. It's not a static thing, because your needs throughout the day, they usually change, and just by orienting the light to the ceiling, or orienting it on a table, or so on and so forth, the intensity and the sort of the light quality changes. So
Mhm.
that's something that I was really obviously interested in exploring, as obviously Achille Castiglione's light works were an extreme um, source of inspiration.
Okay, and so how does the idea to work on these typologies, the table lamp, came up to you? Have you discussed with the brand and with Fabio and Paolo, or you brought your idea to
Oh,
the brand, or what else?
there was definitely a form of brief to begin with. There was definitely a form of brief for a smaller product that was um, easily identifiable, as in scale and color and texture, and the type of light that it was giving off.
Mhm.
So that was definitely one of the starting points in order to identify the product easily, identify it online. Also, it was meant to be a product that was a bit more democratic.
Mhm.
There was obviously a price tag associated to the design of the lamp, and I've been an industrial designer for 14 years, but to work with someone like Fawcett is on a global scale, it's on a mass scale. The price is important, the target demographic is important, and it's something that I've definitely
Yeah, a lot
given.
of things to consider during the process. So, talking about the development, I guess you faced some technical issues during this process. Would you tell us about?
Yes. Well, the technical development was very much a back and forth. I have to say, between the Floss product development team and myself, because I came up with, proportions and schematics for the assembly, and schematics for the actual components being used. But you know, it gets really, to design a product that's so simple, has a ball and it's magnetic, and you get to orient it any way you want it. It's a very simple idea, but you know, in order to calculate the amount of magnetism that you need between a component and a steel ball, and the percentage of magnetism that's required in order for the product to be usable, that's where the very smart, intelligent people from Flos come into play. So you know, Andrea and Francesco are you know, the sort of geniuses that were able to kind of start and stop this project. So that was the main. So there was a lot of you know, moving forward and reevaluating, and every time we thought we had one issue cornered, there was another issue that would happen, and it was very much a start and stop process for a while. And I have to say, most of the problem solving was done by these two people. Yes, definitely. Andrea and Francesco from Floss's product development. Yeah, Andrea Gregis and Francesco Rodriguez.
Okay, good pronunciation.
Yeah.
And so you told us your collaboration with Flos started before the COVID. So talking about the relation between companies and designer, do you think that the pandemic has changed something in this relation, in this collaboration? And
well, the pandemic definitely did.
Something has changed in the design process in general.
There was definitely a lot less in situ meetings, so there was definitely a lot less you know, physical presence. So you know, a lot of this development was done virtually, and you know, just like what we are doing right now, this virtual meeting, you know, it's something that we used to do, but not with such a not with such frequency. You know, most product reviews were done by being there, you know, in your own presence. So that's definitely been a massive change. But there's, you know, so prototypes of the early prototypes, because we've done obviously clearly many prototypes of many lamps before you know, stopping at this specific one. But you know, things would get shipped back and forth and reevaluated, and so the process was you know, less direct, but also much more documented in a way, because everything was, you know, clearly written down, and there was an evolution that was really fantastic.
So maybe, on the other hand, this is the good thing to work virtually. Maybe
yes,
everything is yes, we have virtual file and video and pictures, so maybe more than before.
Yes, definitely. It's something that's evolved and will you know, I think it has an impact on how we just work just generally with most of the brands, and also maybe the possibility, you know, how we work with a brand from Japan, or we work with, you know, a brand from America, or you know, I guess we're more comfortable doing this than we were before. And we all thought that at the beginning, well, some of us thought that it wasn't going to work, and you know, I think we just got used to it, and that's changed.
Okay.
Yeah.
And talking about the lamp, I really love your choice to oversize the joining element instead of hiding. Okay, because usually designers prefer to hide fixing elements, or but you have done the opposite. And at the end, that's the core of the project. It's been a technical challenge to design and develop that joint.
It has under many different levels. So you know, the ball is a steel ball. It's not a stainless steel ball, because if the stainless steel ball would not be magnetic, and the amount of carbon in the ball needs to be done in such a way that the ball doesn't oxidize, and and so that, you know, the ball itself is definitely, you know, a big part of the research that was done in order to also source it and make sure it's industrially available. And the reason why it was done this way is I've done a lot of work in the past using rotating pieces, using ball bearings. So I've done giant works in nylon, for Salon 94 in New York that was that had two giant
Mm-hmm.
plates moving, and the only thing that was in between
Oh
were
yeah,
these
very well.
giant balls. So
Yeah.
this is it's very much a continuation of the work that I've done 5 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
That I was using these balls as a mechanical element, but I was not hiding it because you could have hidden it with
Mm-hmm.
with the front face hiding those elements. So yes, so it's a continuation of this work. It's just utilizing function and showing the function as a means of the user immediately understanding what the product does. And because when you try to hide something, maybe the form and the function aren't so held together, and that's the reason why it was shown in such a way so that the user can immediately understand the fact that the lamp is orientable because of the ball joint, and also as I said, it's a continuation of work that I've done in the past.
And continue talking about the user. Looking at this object, there is a strong relation with gesture and interaction with the object. And so you can move the light diffuser freely around the joint, and you can remove it and then replace it. And also the sound when you replace the upper part is really cool, and it's really sharp, and I like it. And did you design also this gesture and interactions since the beginning, or it just came out working on samples? For example, about the sound that the lamp.
Correct. It came out. It came out working on the sample originally. Just like this model,
Okay.
the ball aspect was supposed to be taken off of the body in this way, and then the reflector was going to be with the top. But then we decided that it was better the other way around through the design process, and that you had this very satisfying way of putting it together, and then the way everything came together. And also we considered packaging. We considered how the product would be made available when it's shipped to you, and then you're also going to have the experience. That's something that was decided between Paolo, Fabio, Francesco, and Andrea, and myself. The experience that you would have when you unpack the product, and how you would put it together. So this very gesture that you're discussing right now has been considered in order to have a user experience that would be positive and sort of wondrous, like so many of the Flos products are. And once again, to bring back the Parentesi light.
I remember the original packaging of the Parentesi was really cool, with a transparent plastic, thermoformed plastic that that doesn't hide the product, and it really looks cool.
Yeah, and most importantly, you kind of understood the fact that there's a wire that needed to be under tension, and there was a weight that needed to be there for the product to work. So there was this unveiling and this sort of putting together that's part of the experience as well. So once again, that's something that was jointly considered between all of us, and I hope that people are enjoying.
I would like to talk in general about lighting objects, because lighting objects are something that are really usual yet magical at the same time, because they need to work on they need to work and inhabit our spaces when they are both switch on and switch off. So as a designer, how do you manage this double behavior of this object?
You mean between the difference of the object
because
existing as a piece of sculpture when it's not being used?
For example, this piece,
so the proportion work, obviously, that was done between the both of the. It's a very, I think, simpler things are usually, for my preference anyway, simpler compositions are usually the winner. So the design of it is incredibly simple. It's two cylinders that are exactly the same diameter and the same length, and one ball. So it's two components that are the same and one component that's existing. And in a way, if you look at them and you put them next to each other, it's a little bit like a palindrome, where you spell it this way or this way, and it's always the same thing. And so there's a sculptural quality to the light object when it's not being used. And I think that's that's a very difficult part to do, but it's definitely something that I've been trying to work on with work in the past. Some obviously my industrial design work and my gallery work, and it was to find the right balance of this sculptural balance and this functional balance. And then we're very lucky here because this light object is both sculptural and very technical and functional in terms of orienting the light. So we're just finding the right balance, and this the capacity of this light, I believe, has achieved that, maybe.
Okay, and I would like to talk a bit about your personal language and your personal approach to design. And looking at your approach, I really appreciate your capability to combine simple volumes, gaining something minimal yet fresh and strong at the end. I would define this style as sort of fresh minimalism, I would say. There is something really far from the cold and boring minimalism from 90s, but it's something closer to, for example, Ettore Sozza's or Memphis period. And
I'll take it.
did you agree with this definition, or
I definitely think it's up to talented people like you to recognize what something is and what something isn't. It's rarely what I rarely think of what my style is or how it should be perceived. I just I have things that I like, and usually they're very it's very it's quite simple. There's simple shapes, simple volumes, and they always have to have an aspect of discovery about them, or an aspect of fun, but not being like a joke. That's terrible design. Well, it's different design. It's not what I do, but it needs to be extremely simple in design language, and it needs to bring an emotion with either the function of the object or the daily usage of the object. And that's something I always try to do in terms of research. And as far as the shapes go, it usually comes from me being in the studio, utilizing ready available materials and cutting them and putting them together by hand very often at first. And that's something as well that you can see from my work that I do with the Breeder in Athens and Cell 94 in New York. My gallery work is only 5% of my practice, and my mass-produced work is 95% of my practice. But they really inform each other. And I think when I make something by hand or prototypes, I very quickly try to mock things up. And so maybe this way of working has an effect on how I design things, but all the shapes usually the shapes are because of the function, and they're very much speaking to one another.
Okay, so and it's been easy to combine your personal approach and your personal workflow and way of work with a company with such a strong heritage as Flos. It's been easy.
Well, it was terrifying.
I guess
because if you're an industrial designer, and I come from a small town in Quebec, in Canada. I come from nowhere, and I got really lucky. I was able to come and study in Europe, and I got to stay in Europe, and but I guess the point I'm trying to make is when a company like Flos gives you a call, it's both the most exciting thing that can happen to you, but it's also terrifying because you might not get something that they like. You might not get it right. You might not. So there's a lot of pressure that comes with this initial contact. And I have to tell you, over the last 4 years, because as I said, you take 2 steps forward and then you take 1 step back, because there's, you think you've solved one problem and then another problem occurs for something that looks so simple. It doesn't look like it should have any problems. But, so it's the amount of stress that goes into wanting to bring in the way I work with a company like Flos was terrifying, but it worked out in the end. I think because it was meant to be, and we all worked really hard in order to come up with fresh ideas that that looked fresh, and that yet did did something that's as old as time, such as directing light. So it worked out in the end.
And talking about the contemporary design, do you think that we could try to define a contemporary language or a contemporary approach to design, or
I
not?
think there's so many references of what design is about that I don't think contemporary is applicable. I think, as I said, I think, you know, there's room for everybody to do their interpretation of what design is. And I know some people think there's a right way and a wrong way of doing design. I had a small, not a fight, but I had a small disagreement with a teacher that refused, not a teacher of mine, a colleague that happened to be teaching, and our disagreement was that, like, people's interpretation of design are their own, and your social context can change everything for one person, and there's no such thing as the right way to design something and the wrong way to design something. I think it's kind of like, it's a tyranny to be told what's right and wrong. So what contemporary design means to me is as many interpretations, and most importantly, where people come from, what taste means to them, and what influences the decisions that they make. So mine happens to be something that's very simple because it's what I prefer aesthetically, and also how I work, because it's very much about making errors and building up on that. So and then some other designers are very much about referencing things that existed before, reinterpreting them. The reason why I went to school personally, it was because I went to Design Academy Eindhoven at the time, was because of Droog design, because it had this extreme DIY way of making things work in a design context. And that's one of the reasons why I went there. That's what influenced me originally. But then obviously as I grew older, the certain design masters such as LEONE, Eames, Jasper Morrison, their way of designing things influenced me. Anyway, so to answer your question, there's no such thing as I don't believe there's a such thing as a contemporary design aesthetic. Everyone makes it what it is.
Okay, and so and you're part of a new wave of young designers. This is the first, maybe the second generation after the generation of the master, the generation of the maestros. And which do you think are the main differences between that period and that generation and that way of work and today? And
yes, I believe that the original
not just in Italy, but in Europe, in general, in Europe.
I definitely believe there was definitely at the time an overwhelming sense of sort of domination from the Italian masters. They were very much hand in hand with the industrialists that were dotted all around Italy. So there was this capacity to manufacture on a broad scale, and the capacity to design a very strong aesthetic design language. And I think as years went on, you had the generation of, as I said, Jasper Morrison and Konstantin Gricic and the Borlak brothers, and who are all actually designers for Flos, as well as Barbara Osgerby, which was much more international, Germany, United Kingdom. And I guess what influenced that sort of openness to working with designers that weren't in the country of origin of industrially produced products had to do with the fact that not everything was centralized. So when things weren't centralized, the capacity to work with all those designers from everywhere kind of happened. And I believe perhaps my generation is a continuation of that. I'm London based, like a lot of other designers. Maybe it has a geographical advantage to be able to easily access the Nordic countries, Italy, France. So perhaps it's
you are a bit in the middle, okay, because you are close to the Scandinavian and to Scandinavian companies and to South European companies. Yeah.
And I think my generation perhaps has maybe it's not as happens as quickly perhaps as previous generations. But I'm very, very glad to be part of the conversation of what design is these days, because it's a huge responsibility to be given an opportunity by Flos to say what you think Flos product should be.
Yeah, and my last question is about your personal references beyond design borders. I'm really curious about your references really out of the design world and really beyond design borders.
Definitely art, art for art's sake, really, with things that are created in order to create this. I think it's something that I was talking about earlier on. This like sense of wonder is definitely something that is the main source of inspiration outside of design. It's just about creating an emotion and a feeling, and having the capacity to do that is overwhelming in art. So, it goes without saying that the 1950s and 60s American minimalists could be a big influence because they created such a overwhelming emotion out of very few things. Arte povera as well in Italy. The sort of evolution of doing more with fewer resources and creating such strong strong art with very little. I believe that's something that would be a huge inspiration to what I do, because when I go to a different city, I always try to go and see artworks, because that's the overwhelmingly inspiring bits of what we can see, I think.